It is often said that Warhammer 40K is a setting and not a story, and that's true for the most part, and yet we have had some phenomenal plot development in recent years. The Primarchs have returned to the setting, the Silent King has come back after realising the Tyranids are going to eat everyone, Eldrad is halfway through a build your own god kit, and rumour has it the Emperor has cramp in his left leg after sitting in the same chair for 10,000 years. And it doesn't stop there. There's another piece of lore development that's been out for almost 2 years now that I think is just awesome and potentially, dare I say it, even dwarfs some of these other things. And yet as a community, I don't think there's been a huge amount of discussion about it. Now, if you're new to this channel, you might be thinking that's just like a YouTube tactic where I'm just going to try and draw you in to earn more of that sweet, sweet ad revenue. However, I'm not doing that. I genuinely think this is monumental. And if by the end of this video you don't believe me, then I've just failed to explain to you just how exciting this is for the future of Warhammer 40k. So, huge spoilers for the Eisenhorn, Ravener and Beckwin series. This is your chance to back out now because we're going to talk about a key character, the character of the King in Yellow. We find out in the second Beckwin book the identity of this character, who's been a mystery up until this point. He's kind of been described as like a massive crime lord. He's so massive, he's thought to be potentially even the most powerful person in the Imperium, even more powerful than the High Lords of Terror, and yet we find out that his name, his true name, is Constantin Valdor. So there's going to be 3 parts to this video. We're going to have who is Constantin Valdor and what lore is kind of relevant here. Then we're going to talk about who the Yellow King is, and then finally how we put all of this together, get some insights into his motivations, and then what this means for the future of Warhammer 40k. However, before I get to that, I just want to talk about the sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is the perfect place to learn something new, whether it's for work or your personal life. I recently started a new job and Skillshare has been fantastic for getting me up to speed on the tools that we use. For example, this JavaScript Toolkit course by Christian Heilman was really useful for me. Christian has a really great way of explaining things in a clear but also entertaining manner, and he also sets reasonable expectations throughout the video, so as you're embarking on an exciting but massive journey, he makes sure you've got the framework in place to go forward and be successful. And whatever your interests are, they're going to have a course for you, so finish out this year strong. And you've got nothing to lose. The first 1,000 people to click the link in my description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So go click that link and make 2023 your year. So, back to the main topic of discussion then, Constantin Valdor, the Captain General of the Custodes and Chief Bodyguard to the Emperor of Mankind. Valdor is actually a rather underrated character in the setting, in my opinion. After the Unification Wars, he's a member of the Triumvirate. This is a very elite group, the other 2 members being Malcador the Sigillite and the Master of Mankind. He's certainly considered to be very important by the Emperor, as Amar Astarte says that the Emperor used a huge amount of resources in order to retrieve the young boy, and was actually responsible for his parents' death. And it seems Valdor definitely got some preferential treatment. He's widely considered to be the first custody ever created by the Emperor, and he also is clearly different to the rest of them. Interestingly, Valdor is so large, many think he is a Primarch. Now I don't believe he is, because as we've seen, he has parents who aren't the Emperor of Mankind. However, fascinatingly, this may still be a title he held, at least at some point, because the Primarchs as we know them were not the first Primarchs, and the leaders of the Thunder Warriors legions were also referred to as Primarchs, despite the fact they had no other discernible traits. And so Constantin Valdor, being the leader of the Custodes around this time also, may still have been referred to by this title. But of course, this really wouldn't be a video on Constantin Valdor if we didn't at least try and compare him to the sons of the Emperor of Mankind. So certainly size-wise, he's about the same size, although it must be said that the sizes do vary in the novels, and he is definitely a very strong boy, having thrown an entire tank at some Thunder Warriors, but we also know that the Primarchs have accomplished feats far beyond this. However, I believe it's in his skill that we really see Valdor coming to the level of a Primarch, so for example in his blade work, which is said in Master of Mankind to match that of any of the sons of the Emperor. So I think that whilst Valdor does match them in terms of skill, he is probably left behind when it comes to kind of raw power or generalmanship or politics or anything like that. However, he doesn't carry with him the immense, let's say, issues that the Primarchs seem to carry, and that I think counts for a lot in this setting. So compared to a bog standard human, he would seem like a demigod, and he's actually recorded as moving so fast that even the Thunder Warriors can't even see his movements. Custodies' names actually get longer with the more victories that they get, and prior to the Horus Heresy, Constantin Valdor actually had 1,932 names, so you're definitely going to want to initial. So being this absolute weapon, it actually seems like the Emperor wanted to bring him down, at least just a bit. In the short story Two Metaphysical Blades, we get a good insight into the Apollonian spear that is given to Valdor by the Emperor himself. This miraculous spear, once wielded by the Emperor himself, grants the bearer truths from those it cuts. For example, with one woman he kills, he sees her entire childhood and the abuse that she suffered, which led her down this path. After this, Valdor realizes that the spear uncovers truths and seeks imperfections, and the Emperor actually says to him that one of the purposes of the spear is to check Constantin Valdor. Killing has been made easy for him, and so he needs to be reminded of the soul stories of his victims when he kills them. During the Horus Heresy, Valdor took part at the Battle of Prospero to punish Magnus the Red for breaking the Edict of Nicaea. He was of course an absolute beast in the battle and took on 30,000 sons who all had precognition, and yet despite the fact they could see the moves he was going to make, he still managed to kill all of them, only taking a single wound himself. After heading back to Terra, he takes on a vital role, a place on the War Council. He even had a hand in the formation of the first ever assassin execution team, as it was he that recommended that one of each assassin should be put together in the team. After this mission fails, we get another great insight into the mind of Valdor as he and Rogel Dawn do argue. Valdor essentially argues against the Imperium having any kind of moral code, and they must do whatever it takes to assure victory. The argument only ends when the Emperor steps in and says there must be no more underhand tactics, and if they want to beat Horus, it's going to have to be head on. The heresy eventually ended, as we know, with the obliteration of Horus Lupercal and the Emperor on the Golden Throne. What's fascinating to me about Valdor after this is his reaction. It's well documented that Rogel Dawn was broken by the Emperor's state, and Valdor is loyal to the Emperor almost to fault, and yet he doesn't seem to have taken this nearly as hard. In the story Two Metaphysical Blades, he even reassures Leman Russ that things are not over and there is plenty more to be done. He misses the Emperor's telepathic thoughts inside of his head, however he seems to have a fervent faith in the Emperor that he knew exactly what he was doing and that maybe the Emperor even planned to be on the Golden Throne. Before the King in Yellow storyline, the last we knew of Constantin Valdor was that his last words were "only in death" before he left the Imperial Palace. The other half of that saying, of course, being "does duty end?", a reference to the Emperor's favourite slogan, but also potentially a nod to the incredible importance he will play in the future. At this point in the video, I think it's definitely worth talking about the relationship between Valdor and Russ for two reasons. The first is that in the old lore it was always hinted that Valdor and Russ headed off together, and they actually went to find the Tree of Life or something that would restore the Emperor of Mankind. The second, and I think more interesting thing, is that even if this isn't what the two of them are attempting to achieve, their relationship is still quite key. The Emperor actually describes them as opposites at one point, and Russ even has the opposite to the Apollonian spear, the Dionysian spear. Conversely to Valdor's spear, this spear actually shows its victims the truth. So for example, when Leman Russ cuts Horus with it, Horus temporarily regains his sanity and some of the corruption is washed away. We do get a cool conversation of Malcador and the Emperor talking when the Emperor is making these spears, and it definitely seems that they might even have a bigger part to play than they did in the Heresy. Yet it seems less likely that Valdor and Russ went looking for the Tree of Life, or at least they didn't end up together, as now we have the King in Yellow. This previously mysterious figure lives in a pocket dimension known as the City of Dust, and in Penitent, Bequin makes her way there and we get an insight into the vast resources at his disposal. So firstly, he's got an army of Grails. These are warp entities that he's created and controls. They're basically demons that don't serve chaos. These aren't the first Grails we've ever encountered. They have been used before by radical Imperials or Inquisitors in order to fight against dark forces. Then, and in my opinion most wildly, we get to an army of Blood Angels in stasis. However, these are not just normal Blood Angels. We actually get to meet one of these guys earlier in the book. He is a Blood Angel but with organic wings, yes, like Sanguinius, which is a mutation that normal Blood Angels don't get. He's also completely succumbed to the Red Thirst when we first meet him, and he actually has no memory of who he once was, so we don't actually know whether these guys were actually Blood Angels before they were taken by the King in Yellow, or whether he has grown his own special brand of Son of Baal. So the King in Yellow is certainly well funded, and he is connected to a very powerful group known as the Cognitae. References to the Cognitae do exist throughout 40k books and into the Horus Heresy, however they seem to be the main enemy of many Inquisitors including Eisenhorn and Ravener, and you could loosely describe them as a dark mirror to the Inquisition. The Emperor himself fought against a force who described themselves as the Cognitae, and so for tens of thousands of years, they, or other forces who have also called themselves the Cognitae, have been fighting against the oppression of the Imperium whilst using the powers of chaos. The full extent of the King in Yellow's involvement with the Cognitae is yet to be revealed, however we do get a couple of very interesting ideas thrown around in the books. The first one is pretty straightforward, which is that he is just a very powerful agent of theirs. However, the second one is much more interesting, especially when we think about Valdor, which is that he's actually infiltrated the Cognitae and simply woven them in to his massive web of lies and deceit and planning. One of the most mysterious things about the King in Yellow is his motivations, and that's why Eisenhorn and Ravener see him as such a threat, as the King in Yellow appears to be searching for the true name of the Emperor of Mankind, and in Warhammer 40k, true names can be used to control beings. This is of course a risk the Inquisition just cannot take. It would make that being virtually unstoppable, and so they are doing everything they can in order to destroy him, despite the fact it seems they may be a bit out of their depth. The King in Yellow has garnered a myriad of enemies, including Craftworld Eldar forces, Cognitae agents, and traitor legions. In fact, it's implied that he has gone at least searching for the demon worlds of the Wordbearers and the Thousand Suns, because of course they have huge libraries of information and may allow him to find this name. He's also gone looking, of course, for the Black Library, although the Harlequins are pretty good at keeping people out. Certainly, however, his goals are connected to the Immaterium. Something else that crops up a lot in the book is Enuncia. This is a special language that is ancient and is used as a weapon. In fact, Bequin in the books escapes from the City of Dust by Enuncia. And so I think it's likely Enuncia is also connected to the King's plans, either through the raw power it will grant him or its ability to allow him to find the name. On the surface, when you hear about the King in Yellow, your mind probably jumps to someone like Alfarius, someone who loves clandestine activities, loves to plot and plan and work from the shadows. However, if you think about it, this does also work very well for Constantin Valdor. One of the incredibly impressive things about the Adeptus Custodes is that as soon as they notice their reaction starting to slip, maybe they get a tiny bit weaker when they're fighting, they will actually kind of resign and they become what's known as the Eyes of the Emperor. And one of the main purposes of the Eyes of the Emperor is to provide a network of spies and informants, and they will then feed any important information back to the Captain General. These ex-custodes no longer carry armor or weapons, but they still provide an immense service to the Emperor. And so if we look at Constantin Valdor in this light, what kind of role would he take on if he left the Adeptus Custodes? What kind of position could he garner for himself if he turned his brilliant mind towards gathering informants to serve the Emperor of Mankind? And so in fact, the idea of the King in Yellow actually perfectly matches what I might imagine Constantin Valdor to do post Siege of Terror. There's really three options for me at this point when it comes to Valdor being the King in Yellow. The first is that Valdor has been corrupted in some way, maybe he's evil, but that seems basically impossible. Firstly, the Emperor had this vision of Valdor being incredibly important, which I think this kind of all ties into, and then it's also important to mention that Custodes are basically incorruptible. There's no discernible evidence at all that a Custode can be corrupted by the powers of chaos, so it doesn't seem very likely that Valdor has been, given how loyal he always has been to the Emperor. The second option is that he is misguided or insane, not entirely implausible. He has been away from the Emperor for a really long time, and it's also worth noting in the Regent Shadow series and the Siege of Terror series that there are these conversations amongst Custodes on how they are conflicted. There are competing ideologies on whether the Emperor foresaw that he would end up on the Golden Throne, and this has led to a number of Custodes being very confused because they're trying to figure out what the Emperor would want them to do, which of course is not an easy easy task. I'm a big fan of this third option, that this is all planned out very thoroughly by Constantin Valdor. If we look at this whole journey throughout this video, from the Emperor foreseeing that Valdor would be incredibly important, to him giving this very powerful spear, wanting him to be checked when it comes to killing people and see through the eyes of even people like traitors as he slays them, I think the Emperor foresaw that Valdor would be incredibly important, and it actually fits the idea of the eyes of the Emperor really well. Constantin Valdor being the ultimate custody would absolutely make him the ultimate eye of the Emperor, and so I think he's very likely building up a force to accomplish a very noble feat. I think he's certainly incorruptible, and I'm very excited to see where this goes. Of course, there's still a bunch of things we don't know. Dan Abnett, of course, left this with a huge cliffhanger, and he has said himself that he does think this will end up having a huge impact on the setting of Warhammer 40k. I highly doubt these forces are going to be present in the game, sadly, but they are still going to serve a fantastic purpose in the lore, it seems. These forces could be deployed to help destroy chaos threats, or maybe even start clearing out the demons in the webway, which might again aid the Emperor in some manner of getting off the Golden Throne. These ideas are just straight from the mind of somebody who's obsessed with Warhammer 40k, so I adore them very much. It's just, what if we had Blood Angels, but they also had wings? How cool would that be? And unbelievably, that is now canon in a Warhammer 40k book. So I'm very, very excited for how this is going to go. I think, as I say, this is going to be massively impactful for the future of Warhammer 40k. If you weren't aware of this plot point before starting this video, I am curious to know, did I do this justice? Are you now as hyped for this future as I am? And if you have read the books, please let me know your theories, or do you have a competing theory compared to mine? Like, I'll be really curious to see what other people think is going to happen. But ultimately, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was really good. I haven't done a lore video like this before, but I love this topic and I talk about it a lot with my friends, so I hope that it would make for a good video. Please do consider liking and subscribing and all of that good stuff, and I'll see you next time.